Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, and we've got one hell of a game for you today in this Tier 8 ranked battle domination mode here on the loop map. This is Alphonse Santoro in the Tier 8 Japanese, technically at the moment heavy cruiser, more on that in a bit, the Megami. The Megami is an oldie but a goldie, although, well, at the moment it's a sort of silvery. Alphonse is using the steel camo. It's been around since this game was in closed alpha. It was the original Japanese Tier 8 cruiser, and what makes this thing unusual is that you get to decide whether or not you're going to play the Megami as a light cruiser or a heavy cruiser. When the ship was designed in the 1930s, it had to comply with treaty regulations, which meant it couldn't have 8-inch guns, because there was a limit on how many heavy cruisers Japan could have. So what Japan did was they built it with 6-inch or 155mm guns, but they made sure that they built it in a way that it would be very, very easy to swap it over to 8-inch or 203mm guns if they were, for example, no longer bound by treaty regulations since they'd attacked the American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor and started a war. So when you get the Megami, by default it comes with the 155mm guns, but you have the option of upgrading it to the 203mm guns. Now, most people don't do that. Not because there's anything particularly bad about the 8-inch guns. They're perfectly fine 8-inch guns. It does come with 10 of them. They have a horrendously slow reload, though, something like 14 seconds. The benefit of having the 8-inch guns is, well, you've got harder hitting armor-piercing shells, but you've also got harder hitting high-explosive shells that can penetrate battleship 32mm armor plating without any skill investment in things like the inertia fuse for high explosive shell skill. If you go with the 155mm guns, however, you are probably going to require at least a 10-point captain in order to take that skill, so that the 155s can actually do damage to anything other than battleship superstructures. But most Megami players still choose to stay with the stock 6-inch guns rather than upgrading to the 8-inch guns for a couple of reasons. They are pretty accurate, and it gets 15 of them. It has 5 triple turrets for the 6-inch guns rather than the 5 double turrets for the 8-inch guns, and the damage per minute, despite the relatively slow reload of 10 seconds, which is kind of pedestrian for a Tier 8 light cruiser, but the damage per minute is so much better. Alphonse, however, has chosen not to do that. He's using the 8-inch guns, which is kind of unusual. Now, by default, he's got the high explosive loaded, and he's managed to get a fire set on the Bayard over there. The Bayard's returning fire with, well, equally dangerous when you're in a cruiser with terrible armor, like, and the Megami really does have bad armor, right? It's you do not want to get shot at by battleship armor piercing. Oh, and the Terribles come out. Now, why would you have done that? I'm thinking that obvious torpedoes are kind of obvious, and he does actually already have the hydro running, and he's changed his course. Very, very slow reload on these 8-inch guns though, but the high explosive shells do hit kind of hard. Yep, there are the torpedoes. Like I said, obvious torpedoes are obvious. The hydro picked them up, but he'd already changed his course slightly in anticipation of the Terrible doing exactly that, because why else would it come out from behind cover in front of a cruiser? There he is again. He might have actually spotted the friendly submarine, who appears to be at periscope depth. If he has, that means the submarine's got a bit of a problem, because he's going to want to dive to escape what looks like a depth charge attack coming in from this French destroyer, but if he dives, he's no longer going to be spotted, because he's the one spotting him. And he really wants Alphonse to kill him. And Alphonse, of course, is only too happy to oblige. Now, the Terrible, of course, is absolutely not going to survive that, because that was 100% a suicide run, but he does manage to take the submarine down with him. Meanwhile, Alphonse, at the moment in cover behind the island, but in anticipation of unloading against the Bayard over there, he's switched to the 8-inch armor-piercing shells. Because like the Megami, the Bayard is a very badly armoured light cruiser with an exposed citadel that when it gets clapped by armor-piercing shells like that, gives me the opportunity to say, that's a paddling. The Bayard, of course, had the opportunity to do exactly the same thing to Alphonse, but it's got high explosive loaded instead of armor-piercing. It's not that the high explosive is doing no damage to Alphonse, it's just not killing him the way Alphonse killed the Biod, although not before the enemy Anhalt managed to nail the friendly Cossack with its secondaries. Surprisingly, the Monarch over there, the British Tier 8 battleship, is actually firing armour piercing. Fortunately, even though the Megami has absolutely terrible armour, if sufficiently angled, it does have enough belt armour to ricochet 15-inch AP. Alphonse switched back to high explosive in order to attempt to... Yes, he's managed to set a fire on the Monarch. It is just a single fire, some Biod torpedoes there, but that's no problem. They're not going to hit anything. So it's a single fire. It's going to continue to burn. Or at least it should, unless the Monarch's dumb enough to waste his damage control on a single fire. And Alphonse is kind of counting on that. He's managed to get enough clearance here to lob some more shots over the island undetected. Can he get a double fire? Because that would probably force the Monarch to use his damage control. It is a double fire, and the Monarch has used his damage control. Right, you can set a third on fourth fire now. They're going to burn for their full duration, which on a battleship is 60 seconds, and that's a lot of damage. In the meantime, despite the extremely rude interruptions imposed by the two French enemy ships and the Monarch over there, Alphonse has managed to flip this cap circle here at Charlie, which means that his team are now slightly ahead on points, despite the fact that both teams have scored 2 kills. When I say both teams have scored 2 kills, Alphonse has scored 2 kills, and the enemy team have scored 2 kills. There's an additional fire. Can he get a double fire? A double fire would be absolutely fantastic, because we know that the Monarch's damage control is on cooldown. Oh, hang on a second. This team have just lost another ship. There is a double fire, however. That is fantastic news. We know the Monarch's damage control is on cooldown, so those fires are going to stick. They are outnumbered 4-3, however. And the friendly Kagero is not going to achieve anything useful by chasing down a battleship, sailing away from him at full speed, because his torpedoes are never going to catch up. And there's another... That's a triple fire. Well, it's probably still just a double fire, because the first fire's probably expired by now, but it's still really bad news. But what's even worse news is the loss of yet another ship. The Lenin has gone down. The team just lost the Atlantico. There's now only Alphonse himself here in the Megami, and there's another fire. That's a really bad day to be in a Monarch. But yeah, there's just Alfonso and the Kagero, who has at least finally realised that he's completely wasting his time chasing after that Monarch. Now, somebody is flipping the central cap at Bravo. And Alphonse did just get spotted momentarily, which probably means that somebody just poked out from behind that central island, saw him, thought, nope, ducked back in behind the island in order to continue capping. And it's probably going to be the enemy submarine. So, let's put that theory to the test. He's popped his spotter plane, didn't see anything. He's launched his depth charge attack planes. He's paying attention to see if he sees any anti-aircraft tracer. There isn't any, because it's either somebody who doesn't have any anti-aircraft guns, like a submarine, or they were smart enough to turn them off. However, because he was on the surface and capping, the Kagero did manage to spot him. There was at least one splash, I think, from the depth charges. So some damage, and it did cause flooding. And that flooding is continuing to cause damage. The submarine, of course, forced to crash dive, which means it's not spotting the Kagero, and the Kagero is taking advantage of that to move into the cap circle, and as well as reflip it while the submarine is below periscope depth. It's also allowing the Kagero to set up for a depth charge attack on the sub's last reported position, which he's hoping to do undetected. Hoping. However, as Alphonse is lining up for yet more high explosive barrages on the Monarch, who's come back to the fight, the Benson appears, and he is surface spotting the Kagero, which is really bad news. Also, really slow reload on these 8-inch guns, which means that the Kagero goes down, and momentarily Alfonso is alone against 4 enemy ships before his 8-inch shells find the Benson in its smokescreen and take him out of the equation too. The Kagero, of course, got... Oh, hang on a second. Oil slick. Depth charge attacks. Out. The Kagero, of course, killed before he could finish flipping this central cap, which means the enemy team, as well as enjoying a 3-1 ship advantage, also enjoy a 2-1 cap advantage, and are ahead on points. Submarine clearly at periscope depth, I mean fairly obviously. Not only did Alfonso get spotted, he also got pinged. homing torpedoes curling around the island, uses the damage control to break the target lock, and he is in a very, very tough spot here, not just because he's alone against 3 enemies, but he obviously doesn't want to fight around the left side of the island, because that exposes him not just to the submarine, but also the Monarch. On the other hand, he doesn't have a much better situation coming around the right side of the island, because the enemy Anhalt is right there, and it has torpedoes of its own. It also has 14-inch guns, but that's not actually too bad, because you can take armor-piercing shells of that caliber on the chin, like that, without being immediately destroyed. The torpedoes, however, much more significant and pressing. Oh, he just dodged it. Now, he has torpedoes of his own, of course, but they're all rearward firing, which means if you're approaching a target, you have to expose broadside in order to get them away. But his fires have just sunk the Monarch. There's the double strike, the torpedoes. Took out the Anhalt. He's going to have to beach himself here in order to avoid eating that last Anhalt torpedo. But that's not a terrible thing, because you can use that sandbar to shield yourself from any incoming torpedoes from the surviving... Oh, hello, enemy submarine. Just got a ping off. Okay, gave your position away. We will drop those depth charges. So he knows there are going to be homing torpedoes coming. He used the damage control to mitigate the sonar ping. And sure enough, here come the homing torpedoes. I think he was initially... The plan was to mitigate the sonar ping and then run for the cover of the smoke screen. The problem now, of course, well, your damage control can mitigate the sonar ping, but the damage control's on a 1-minute cooldown. The sonar ping's on a 20-second cooldown, so the submarine can just ping you again. Whoa, that was close. But he's gone undetected, which means one of two things. Either the submarine has dived below periscope depth, or it's ducked in behind that island there and no longer has direct line of sight. And it's spotted him again, which means it's definitely come back up to periscope depth. Or possibly it's even surfaced. I mean, I don't know how much dive capacity it had left, but typically at the end of a battle, submarines tend to not have an awful lot and have to stay on the surface longer than they prefer. Yeah, there he is. Depth charge attacks out. He's completely safe from any torpedoes. He's got this nice big fat juicy island between himself and his victim. And with that little health remaining, even a splash is going to be enough to kill him. There he goes. That's it. There's the victory. Kraken unleashed. And not just 5 kills, by the way. This is ranked. There are only 6 ships per side. Alfonso Santoro here, in the Tier 8 heavy cruiser version of the Bugami, sank the entire enemy team, earning Arsonist, Solar Warrior, Double Strike, Kraken Unleashed, First Blood, and High Caliber. Unsurprisingly, top of the team on experience earned. Frankly, I think he's just showing off at this point. That was one hell of a performance. In a ship that's traditionally considered more than a bit of a glass cannon and tends to live fast, die young, and leave a good-looking corpse. But that absolutely did not happen today, so yeah, really, really well played. And I hope you all enjoyed it, because that's it for today. As always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.